All right, strap yourselves in because today we are going deep into the world of aerodynamics.
Ooh, I like it.
You sent over this awesome aviation textbook chapter, and wow,
Yeah.
it's incredible how much goes into making a plane fly, right?
It really is.
Like,
Yeah.
we're going to break down how planes fly, the science behind it.
The physics.
Yeah, and I have to say, some of these concepts are pretty mind-boggling.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited to get into it.
Yeah.
So the textbook starts off by talking about these four forces:
Okay.
lift, weight, thrust, and drag.
Right.
Kind of like the basic building blocks of flight, right?
Yeah, the fundamentals.
Yeah.
For sure.
So can we break those down a bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's what?
So weight is, obviously the force pulling the plane down due to gravity.
Okay.
Thrust is the force created by the engine, so that's pushing the plane forward.
Right.
Drag is the resistance that the plane encounters as it moves through the air. You think of it almost like a friction. And then lift is what counteracts the weight and keeps the plane up in the air.
It's interesting how those forces are kind of like balancing each other out.
Yeah, they're always interacting.
Yeah, constantly interacting. And it's different during takeoff, cruising, landing, right?
Exactly, yeah. Different phases of flight.
Yeah.
It's always a balancing act for the pilot.
So the pilot's like constantly juggling these four forces.
Yeah, you could say that.
To keep the plane in the air and moving in the right direction.
Right, exactly.
So I noticed in the book it talks about, when a plane takes off and the nose tilts up?
Oh, yeah.
What's going on there?
Well, that's the pilot adjusting what we call the angle of attack, which is the angle between the wing and the oncoming airflow.
So by tilting the nose up, they're increasing lift.
Exactly. They're increasing the angle of attack, which increases the lift generated by the wings. So that allows the plane to take off at a relatively low speed.
That's pretty cool. I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah, it's pretty neat how it works.
It's almost like they need that extra lift to get off the ground.
Right, exactly.
Since they're going slower.
Yeah, it all ties together.
So this balancing act, is it happening all throughout the flight?
Oh, yeah, constantly.
Even when it's, like, cruising?
Even when it's cruising, yeah.
What about, like, gliding?
Gliding is interesting because you don't have the engine power.
Right.
But you can actually use a portion of the plane's weight to contribute to thrust.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I always thought weight was just pulling the plane down.
It is, but it depends on the direction.
Okay.
If the plane is descending gradually,
Right.
a component of its weight will actually act in the direction of motion. So it can provide a little bit of thrust.
That is super counterintuitive.
I know, it's pretty cool though, right?
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's how pilots can maintain control even without engine power.
Wow, so we're starting to see how these forces all interplay.
Yeah, it's all connected.
And it's more than just, big engines.
Oh, for sure. You're actually kind of working with these forces.
Harnessing them.
Yeah, to make the plane fly.
It's a delicate dance.
So angle of attack seems to be like a key part of this.
It's crucial, yeah.
I mean, we're talking about it a lot.
It determines how much lift a wing generates, so it's kind of a big deal.
Okay, so the pilots are adjusting that.
All the time, yeah.
Constantly.
They're always making little adjustments to the angle of attack.
Along with, like, the engine power, right?
Exactly, and the thrust.
To control speed, altitude.
Yep, it's all connected.
So if a pilot wants to slow down,
okay,
what are they doing?
So they might reduce the engine thrust.
Okay.
And then slightly increase the angle of attack to maintain lift.
Ah, so they're compensating.
Exactly.
So it's like a seesaw almost.
Yeah, kind of.
One goes down, the other goes up.
You got it.
And this is happening all the time during flight.
Oh, yeah, constantly.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
It's all about maintaining that sweet spot,
Yeah.
Enough lift, enough thrust to overcome the drag. Right.
And the right angle of attack to get where they need to go.
And they're doing all this while they're like, talking to air traffic control.
Right.
Navigating.
It's impressive.
Keeping an eye on all the instruments.
Yep, a lot going on.
That's a lot to handle.
It really is. It takes a lot of skill and training.
Yeah, no kidding.
Speaking of skill.
Yeah.
Let's talk about stalling for a second.
Okay, so stalling, this is something I always kind of
it's a bit of a mystery for a lot of people.
Yeah. So it says here it's like a loss of lift.
Right.
When the angle of attack goes too high.
Exceeds a critical point, yeah.
But does that mean the wings just, like, stop working?
That's a common misconception, actually.
Okay.
The wings don't completely stop producing lift.
Oh.
It's more like the airflow over the wing gets disrupted.
Okay.
So you get a big drop in lift,
Yay.
but it doesn't just disappear entirely.
So, like, imagine,
Like a river flowing over a rock.
Yeah, okay.
If the rock's at a gentle angle, the water flows smoothly.
Right.
But if it gets too steep, the water starts to separate and tumble.
Oh. Okay.
That's kind of what's happening with the airflow during a stall.
So the wings are still kind of working,
Yeah, they're just not as efficient.
but they're not, like, totally useless.
Right, they're still producing some lift.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, it's a gradual process, not an on-off switch.
So it sounds like angle of attack is super important.
Yeah, definitely a key factor in stalling.
And, like, pilots really need to be aware of it.
Absolutely, especially during maneuvers.
Like turns and climbs.
Yeah, those are critical times.
So how do they know, like, what the angle of attack is?
Well, they have instruments that help them.
Okay.
They also rely on their training
Right.
to recognize the signs of an impending stall.
So there are, like, warning signs?
Oh, yeah. The plane will start to behave differently,
Okay.
and pilots are trained to pick up on those cues.
So they can, correct it before it becomes a problem.
Exactly. They have procedures for recovering from a stall.
It makes you feel a lot better knowing they go through all this training.
Absolutely. Safety is paramount in aviation.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot that goes into it.
So we've covered the 4 forces. We've talked about angle of attack and stalling.
Basics, yeah.
Yeah, but there's something else here I want to talk about.
Okay, what's that?
Lift-drag ratio.
Oh, interesting one.
Yeah, what is that?
So the lift-drag ratio is essentially a measure of how efficiently a wing generates lift compared to how much drag it produces.
Okay.
So higher ratio
Yeah.
means more efficient wing.
So more lift with less drag.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's good.
Yeah, that means you can fly farther, use less fuel.
Right, so it's like how much bang for your buck you're getting.
Exactly. It's all about efficiency.
Yeah, what affects that ratio?
Lots of things.
Like what?
The shape of the wing, the surface smoothness,
Okay.
even the angle of attack we were talking about before.
So even tiny things can make a difference.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like I noticed it said something about dirt on the wings.
That's right, yeah.
Can actually increase drag.
Yeah, even a thin layer of dirt can disrupt the airflow,
Wow.
create turbulence,
Yeah.
and reduce the lift.
So keeping the plane clean.
It's not just about looking good.
Right.
It's about performance, too.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's all connected.
I never would have thought about it that way.
Yeah, there you go. Now you know.
Okay, so we've talked about, lift, weight, thrust, drag,
Yep.
angle of attack, lift-drag ratio,
Some key concepts.
stalling.
Ooh.
But I still want to know more about, like, the actual parts of the plane.
Oh, you mean the control surfaces?
Yeah, like flaps and spoilers, all that stuff.
Okay, yeah, we could definitely get into that.
Because that's how the pilots actually control the plane.
Right, they use those surfaces to manipulate the airflow.
So let's dive into that.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
I'm really curious to learn more about how those things work.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. We'll unravel the mysteries of those fascinating control surfaces.
Perfect. I can't wait.
Let's fly! Welcome back to our deep dive into how planes fly.
Yeah, that last bit about how even dirt on the wings can mess things up.
Right. It's crazy.
It really makes you appreciate the whole design
Oh, yeah.
and all the engineering that goes into it.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, for sure.
And those control surfaces you mentioned play a huge role.
Yeah, like flaps, spoilers, all that.
They're essential for controlled flight.
I'm especially curious about those flaps. Like, what do they actually do?
So flaps are like extensions of the wing surface,
Okay.
and they increase lift.
So they make the wing bigger, basically?
Kind of, yeah. They extend the wing's reach, you could say.
So it can grab more air?
Exactly. And that generates more lift.
I always thought they were kind of like air brakes.
Well, they do help slow the plane down for landing
Okay.
by increasing drag.
So that's how they descend more steeply
Exactly.
and approach the runway at a safe speed. But they're also used for takeoff, right?
Yes, that's right.
I remember reading that.
They provide that extra lift at low speeds so the plane can take off quicker.
Oh, right, in a shorter distance.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And they can even be adjusted to different angles depending on the phase of flight.
So like takeoff versus landing?
Exactly. Yeah.
So they're pretty versatile.
They are, yeah, multi-purpose tools for the pilots.
Okay, so what about spoilers?
Spoilers are kind of the opposite of flaps.
Ah.
They disrupt the airflow over the wing.
So they create drag,
Exactly.
and that slows the plane down.
Yeah, think of them as air brakes.
Okay, so they're used after touchdown.
Right, along with the regular brakes on the wheels.
Okay, to bring the plane to a complete stop.
Right, but they can also be used in flight.
Really?
Yeah, to control the descent rate.
Huh.
So the pilot can adjust how quickly the plane descends.
By using the spoilers.
Exactly.
Wow, so they have multiple functions too.
They do, yeah, they're quite versatile.
So we've got flaps, spoilers. What about slats?
Slats are interesting.
Okay.
They're usually found on the front edge of the wing,
Okay.
and they work with the flaps to further enhance lift.
So they team up.
You could say that.
At lower speeds?
Right, so they help prevent stalling.
Oh, right. Stalling.
When the airflow separates from the wing.
And you lose lift.
Exactly.
So slats are important during takeoff and landing then?
Absolutely. When the plane is flying slow and at high angles of attack,
Makes sense.
they help keep that airflow attached to the wing.
So they're like a safety net almost?
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
So the plane doesn't just suddenly drop out of the sky.
Right.
That's good to know.
And what's even cooler is that they work automatically.
So the pilot doesn't have to, think about them.
Well, they do have to be aware of them,
Right.
but they deploy and retract based on the plane's airspeed and angle of attack.
That is so cool. It's like the plane has a mind of its own.
It's pretty amazing how it all works together
All this technology working behind the scenes.
to keep us safe and make flight possible.
Exactly.
And we haven't even talked about the really advanced control surfaces.
Oh, yeah, like on those super fast jets.
Right, like variable incidence, horizontal stabilizers.
We remember seeing that in the book.
So those are adjustable tail surfaces
Okay.
that give pilots more control over the plane's pitch.
Especially at high speeds.
Exactly, yeah.
I remember we talked about trim earlier.
Right, adjusting the plane's balance.
So it flies level without the pilot having to, hold the controls constantly.
Exactly.
So these variable incidence things, they help with that
They do, especially as planes get close to the speed of sound.
because things get crazy at that speed, right?
Oh yeah, the forces change dramatically.
So why not just have a fixed horizontal stabilizer?
You could,
Okay.
but it would require huge movements from the elevator.
Which is?
The movable part on the tail that controls pitch.
Okay.
And those big movements would create a lot of drag.
And probably make the plane unstable.
Exactly. So the variable incidence stabilizer gives the pilot more flexibility.
So it's smoother.
Exactly.
And they have more precise control.
Yes, even when those shock waves start forming.
Speaking of shock waves, that's something I wanted to ask about.
Okay, what about them?
The book mentions something called PHAK.
Ah, yes, that's a fun one.
It didn't sound very fun.
Well, it's a phenomenon that can happen as a plane approaches the speed of sound.
Okay.
Remember those shock waves we talked about forming over the wings?
Yeah.
As the plane goes faster, those shock waves can cause the center of pressure on the wing to shift back.
So the nose of the plane pitches down.
Exactly. It's like the plane is being tucked down by invisible forces.
Well, that doesn't sound good.
It can be dangerous if the pilot isn't prepared for it.
So how do they deal with it?
Lots of training,
Okay.
recognizing the signs,
Right.
having procedures to recover.
It sounds pretty intense.
It can be, but pilots are well trained for it.
It's like they have to adapt their whole flying style.
You could say that, yeah.
As they approach those higher speeds.
It's a different ballgame up there.
So are there any ways to, prevent mock tuck from happening?
Designers have come up with some clever solutions.
Like what?
Well, one is the placement of the horizontal stabilizer.
Okay.
They put it up high on the tail fin in a T shape
Right. I think I saw that.
that keeps it out of the turbulent air from the wings.
So it's less affected by those shock waves.
Exactly. It's pretty ingenious.
It's like they're outsmarting the aerodynamics.
In a way, yeah, they're working with the forces to minimize their negative effects.
This whole deep dive has been so insightful.
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
It's really amazing how complex flight is.
It is, but it's also incredibly elegant.
Yeah, when you understand how it all works together.
Exactly. It's a beautiful symphony of forces, technology, and human skill.
Well said. So what's next?
Well, in our final descent,
Okay.
we're going to look at some of the practical implications of all this
Cool.
for both pilots and passengers.
That's
We'll talk about maneuvering speed, load factor, and those VG diagrams we mentioned earlier.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
It'll be a smooth landing, I promise.
I can't wait. Welcome back, everyone, for the final part of our deep dive into how planes fly.
Ready to bring it in for a landing.
I think so, yeah. After that whirlwind tour of, flaps and spoilers and shock waves.
We covered a lot of ground, literally.
Yeah, it's been pretty intense, but so cool.
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Before the break, you mentioned those VG diagrams.
Right, those are important.
I'm still not totally clear on, what they are.
Okay, so the V diagram is kind of like a roadmap for safe flying.
Okay.
Imagine a graph.
Okay.
One axis is airspeed,
Right.
and the other axis is load factor.
Which, remind me.
That feeling of being pushed into your seat during turns and stuff.
Oh, right, like G-forces.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so this diagram shows the limits of what the plane can handle.
Exactly. It outlines the safe operating envelope for that specific aircraft.
So it's like, don't go beyond these lines.
Yeah, kind of. It shows the stall speed at different load factors.
Okay.
And also the maximum load factor the plane can handle at different speeds.
So it's like a visual guide to make sure you don't, break the plane.
Yeah, essentially it helps pilots avoid exceeding the structural limits.
I can see why that would be important.
It's critical for safety. Pilots use it to plan maneuvers.
Right, so they know what the plane can and can't do.
Exactly. And they can anticipate potential stresses on the aircraft.
So we've got these limits, this safe operating envelope.
Right. And we need to stay within those boundaries.
Okay, and maneuvering speed, how does that fit in?
So maneuvering speed, or VA, is the maximum speed
Okay.
at which the pilot can safely make full control inputs.
So like full rudder, full stick.
Exactly. Without risking damage to the plane.
Okay, so if you go faster than VA.
And you try to yank the stick back.
Yeah.
You could overstress the wings.
Or the tail.
Yeah, it's like driving a car too fast around a corner.
Right, you could lose control. So VA is kind of like a speed limit for aggressive maneuvers.
That's a good way to think about it.
And it's not always the same, right?
Right, it changes depending on the weight of the plane.
Altitude, all that stuff.
Exactly. Pilots need to be aware of it constantly.
It's like that balancing act again.
It all comes back to that.
Speed, angle of attack, load factor.
Got to keep them all in harmony.
To stay within those limits.
Exactly. And pilots develop a feel for it over time.
So it's not just about reading instruments.
It's about experience and intuition, too.
A sixth sense, almost.
You could say that.
Wow, it really makes you appreciate the skill of these pilots.
They are highly trained professionals.
No kidding. I feel like I've learned so much from this deep dive.
That's what it's all about, sharing knowledge and sparking curiosity.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on flight now.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
There's so much more to learn.
Oh, absolutely. The world of aerodynamics is vast and endlessly fascinating.
So keep exploring, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this incredible journey.
Until next time, happy flying.
And safe travels.